Big thing that most professional musicians are dealing with or have dealt with or will deal with is burnout. How do we as full-time musicians negotiate burnout? Negotiate working too much, working too little? How do we cope with all the different stresses that come our way? Now, it's something that I've been currently navigating, especially over the last 12, 15 months or so. I've been constantly on the show, did a show for 10 months, 4 months in the States, 6 months West End, whilst when back in the UK, depping out shows to do gigs with Emily Sandé. The show run ended in April, and then I went on tour with Emily over summer to then start the show back up again in the West End from October. Now, for those of you who don't know, the West End is like 8 shows, sometimes up to 12 shows a week. We're on 8, but it gets a lot. And I've been learning about negotiating the challenges that come with a constantly packed schedule, especially when it's the same thing over and over again. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with constantly being on the go? How do we balance focusing on the gig we have versus keeping the calendar full for when we're not on that gig anymore? It's been a lot to navigate. So one thing I've discovered that's been important is focusing on the things that are within our control. Okay, what's within your control? So for me, that might be practicing. What am I practicing? Preparation for the gigs, being prepared and making sure, even just things as basic as transport, but with all the strikes and everything going on right now in London and roads being crazy as well, it's just making sure that's all sorted. I wrote off a car, got my car sorted now, but yeah, there's been lots in that way. How do you manage your burnout or avoid getting burnt out in the first place? There comes a line between quality of life and working to get the work, and at some point you have to work out where your priorities are. So I've made a conscious effort this year, after being properly burnt out last year to the point where I got sick, to dep out more shows. So I'm usually depping out at least 1 or 2 shows every week, simply from a lifestyle standpoint. It's been important for me to take that time out, that time back, just to keep my head sane. And then in and around that, I'm going to personal health, looking after myself personally has been a big thing. So part of my routine now is usually going to the gym and maybe a sauna before the show. So we've got a membership around the corner, about 8 minutes up the road from the theatre. So I'll come into town early. Ideally meal prep, doesn't always happen, but hit a small workout, hit the sauna, then go up into our cool times. Now, we're an on-stage band too, so we can't get away with what a lot of other people get away with in pits. I think it's becoming more of a thing now for on-stage bands to be involved in theatre shows. We have it with Choir of Man. I know they've got an arrangement like that in Come From Away. They get the band on a fair bit in Get Up Stand Up musical. I'm sure there's a few others. I was never really a theatre head before, and I wouldn't call myself a theatre head now, but I've been definitely very grateful to do that work. Now, with that has come juggling, handling that workload, plus then going to other events to make sure the calendar's full for whenever this show decides to not be running, or I decide to move on elsewhere. It's gonna happen one way or the other at some point, so it's good to be prepared. And I've very much come to the conclusion, or I'm trying to instill practices and boundaries in my life with the shows and with the gigs, where it can never come before family and my personal health. So I've kind of stopped taking on like big corporate gigs that are miles away and driving back home at like 2-3 a.m. in the morning potentially. Where possible, I've stopped doing that. I don't want to be driving back super late, tired. More importantly, I don't want to be driving super tired. So that's now something I make sure I get within a contract, where if it is that, it either needs to be very good pay so that I can choose to book a room, or more commonly accommodation is provided. Now obviously it depends on the gigs you've got, you can't always negotiate that in, but I think it's important to have those boundaries for yourself, knowing where you're going to put your foot down to stop you getting burnt out, to stop you getting hurt, because there's no honor in getting in an accident because you were driving tired. What else can we do to avoid burnout or reduce it? Do you know one thing I've discovered, or clocked as well, whilst working this show, whilst working this industry, is that the music job as a session musician can actually be pretty lonely. You spend a lot of time practicing and learning stuff, which requires you to be in a room by yourself, and you spend a lot of time traveling back and forth from different locations. So in my hometown, everyone's working 9 to 5s, and a lot of my musician friends, they're off gigging here, there, or everywhere. So actually finding the time to meet up in the daytime hours, my hours are almost flipped from everyone else. When everyone else is off, that's key working time, including weekends and evenings. So that's been something I've been navigating and still working out to find a balance there. But yeah, full-time musicians, part-time musicians, freelancers who dealing with burnout, dealing with heavy workloads. I know photographers and videographers can sometimes sit in that bracket as well. Let me know what you guys are doing for burnout, for limiting burnout, reducing burnout, for workload. Let me know what boundaries you've set for yourself. Let me know in the comments.